I'm afraid that I'm not going to be giving you good news about security guarantees. I don't think this deal offers anything in the way of something that could be construed as a security guarantee. This is a largely symbolic deal. Even if there are eventually U.S. personnel meaning really civilians, right, on the ground exploring mining, it's really not a security guarantee. I just don't see this as actually providing anything credible in the way that it ties American hands moving forward.
The White House has framed this as kind of an indirect security guarantee, Kelly, right? As you suggest, U.S. contractors at some point will be teaming in Ukraine. How dare Russia attack Ukraine with Americans on the ground? I guess my question, though, is how long it would take for these contractors to actually dig in. It could take many, many years to get working mines and processing in place.
Yes, I mean, I think the first question is, are there U.S. companies that are interested in doing this, given the security situation? I mean, that's the first thing, right? And the second is, if from a business perspective, do they see this as a potentially profitable enterprise? Because there are real questions about exactly what is there in terms of minerals, because these are based on a lot of Soviet, surveys. And also, is it going to be worth the investment, right? It'll take a lot of startup costs to do this. So, I think that's one set of questions, right, about whether we're going to see this actually happening. But assuming it does, and there are contractors on the ground, I'll just say that, we had hundreds of thousands of U.S. military forces in West Germany during the Cold War. And there were always questions about whether that would be sufficient to draw us directly in to a military engagement with the Soviet Union. So I'm very doubtful that U.S. Civilians being there, to essentially try to get profits, economic opportunity, that would be a death of, tens or even hundreds or even thousands might be enough to draw us into a military conflict. I just don't see that happening.
Okay, so your skepticism around this being something that can provide a long-term durable peace is duly noted, Kelly. But do you think in the short term it can help precipitate a peace deal of some kind between the U.S. and Russia? Does this still put some incremental pressure on the Kremlin?
Yeah, so I think this deal does two things. As I said, I think it's symbolic, but it does two things on a symbolic level that are useful. One, it gave Donald Trump a sense that he was getting something back from the Ukrainians, and that seemed to be very important to him. And I think the other thing it did is it actually did signal some level of repair in the U.S.-Ukrainian relationship from what we saw, in that dramatic White House blow up. And so I think the fact that, it seems like the United States and Ukraine have restored their working relationship is really important as a signal. And there is a couple lines in the agreement itself, the text that the Ukrainians released, that I think is a signal to Russia. One being that it refers to Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which I think is quite significant. And so we see some hardening language that the American side is willing to use in talking about the Russians, which I think is a signal that we're going to see more pressure on Putin to actually negotiate in a serious way.
Kelly Grieco, I want to ask you about what's going on in the Red Sea, because with so much news, it's not something that's been on the front page lately. The fact is the U.S. forces continue to attack Houthi rebels in Yemen, and the UK is now participating in joint operations. This is, of course, the same attack that was referred to in the Signalgate scandal that has apparently helped to contribute to the end of Mike Waltz's career as national security advisor at the White House. There was a report just a couple of days ago that the USS Harry Truman had to take such evasive measures after being shot at by Houthi rebels that an FA-18 fighter jet actually fell out of the boat while it was being towed into the ocean, $67 million into the drink. What are we not hearing about that's taking place in the Red Sea right now? How active are our forces? And what kind of threat are they under when we hear about missiles being fired at aircraft carriers?
Yeah, so, this morning I was reading a story that said we've now hit 1,000 targets, which is extraordinary to me, particularly because earlier this week I read another report saying it was 800. So, in a span of a few days, it sounds like we've hit another 200 targets. What we're seeing is a lot of use of force, a lot of strikes are being conducted, but it's actually not generating an operational strategic effect in terms of reducing the Houthi threat to the Red Sea. And of course, this is coming at enormous costs, and not just in terms of those missile strikes, but also these kinds of incidents, one F-18 being shot down accidentally by a carrier, and another, this case where, the aircraft went off the side, into the Red Sea itself. We call those soft kills in the military field, in the sense that, it wasn't directly shot down by the Houthis, but the Houthis get, credit in a sense for the loss of two F-18s because they wouldn't have been lost other than the fact they were participating in these operations. So this is enormously expensive for us, and it's not achieving an operational strategic effect. I can't tell you why we're still doing this other than that it seems that we want to be doing something about the problem and projecting some level of strength. But if the goal is to, preserve the Red Sea and traffic in the Red Sea, that's clearly not being achieved.